we go, and I'm going to start it on here. That's good. Yep. And we will just get on with this. So, my name is Morna Gerard, and I'm interviewing Lee Eltzroth in conjunction with GSU Special Collections and Archives 50th Anniversary Celebrations. The date is September 1st, 2020, and we are conducting this interview remotely via Zoom. Lee, do I have your permission to record this interview?
You do.
Awesome. So can you tell me when you were hired by GSU Special Collections and Archives?
All right. In the very beginning, I was hired as a student assistant. I guess the first student assistant in that department in 1970. I guess the Dr. Gracie had begun this thing, and it had been going a few months at least when I started, and I was a student. I was an art student. I was a student in the art department. And my father had told me that David Gracie was doing this at Georgia State, and maybe if I was interested, and he knew I was interested, he knew me pretty well, I could see about getting a student job there. And my dad was in his second career, as he was military. And once he retired, he eventually began working with the state archives, and then went over to the what was the Atlanta Historical Society. And he knew David Gracie. The Society of Georgia Archivists had only a few years begun, and my dad was the second president, and I think David Gracie was the third. So that helped, I suppose. I don't know, but it was, I think we were on the 5th floor of the library, and of the original building. And we worked under the Dr. Pullen, was the librarian at that point. And the next director, I believe, was, when he passed away, the next director was a woman who I liked very much and have no recollection of her name. So the first staff was very small, in addition to myself. As the assistant archivist, Faye Phillips was a secretary. And there was Dr. Gracie as the director.
How much space did you have?
Not much. We had the front room. Well, Dr. Gracie had an actual office. I mean, with a door, or windows, whatever. And Faye was sort of outside that in a little bigger area. And then Bob and I were in the workroom, which they had partitioned off, I guess, because there were carrels in there on one side, okay, where I would often work. And then there was a work table. And, at that point, I cannot even remember researchers coming in, but I believe they would have sat out in that main room in the front. But I honestly can't remember them. We were just hard at work processing. And I did an awful lot of processing and inventorying union minutes. We were basically the Southern Labor Archives. That was it. And so many union minutes. And then so many of them ended with this phrase, and a good time was had by all. And to this day, I use that because it was so perfect. And a good time was had by all. But one thing I do remember about getting into this was that the minutes covered that time period. Some of the things that I went through were prior to and during World War II. And the women were coming in because the women were working because the men were away. And I remember being so irritated that once the men came back, the women were losing those jobs.
Yeah.
And the union didn't want them anymore, basically, you know. Oh, you're not, you know, you're out of here. So that was something that, you know, I'm just now thinking about that that struck me as not right, not quite right. And I think before I left, there was another graduate student, another student assistant who was a grad student around, and a fellow whose, of course, name completely escapes me, and I don't know that we ever actually worked together or anything. But I don't remember any of the actual university archives being there yet, but they may have begun coming in. I have no clue. I don't remember that. I remember only working with the labor materials.
Do you
So
know
that must have happened shortly after. But I also remember when I was still a student, I remember when they moved into the Urban Life building, and I would go up to special collections there. And then when they were moved over to the, I don't even know I can't remember what the Georgia State name of it is. That was the old municipal auditorium.
At like the Alumni Hall.
Yes, that's right. They were in there.
Yeah.
The department was located there for a while.
How
before
much
they ever came back to the library.
What kind of volume did you have at that time?
Well, it had grown quite a bit, and have you interviewed Laurel yet? Laurel Bowen?
Not yet.
I don't know when she began, but somehow I associate her with some of those, one of those earlier locations. Okay. And so they must have been beginning to collect university archives at that point. I know I worked quite a bit with the university archives materials when in my later position as women's collections archivist, and pulling together all those various women professors and things, and particularly the early ones, and getting into that business. So, but Dr. Gracie and I stayed in touch for years. I mean, we're still in touch, really. And he was at my first wedding reception. He and his wife. And even though I was in Austin a few times, I didn't see him again. Well, I saw him a few times briefly at SAA meetings back when I was still a member of SAA. And but I didn't see him and his wife again until I don't know what year it was. The year that Christine de Catanzaro was made a fellow. So and Dr. Gracie came to I think we might have been
Athens. Yeah,
I think it was an Athens meeting. Yeah. And I think he had a granddaughter at the university at that point, but that was another one of the times that he came out and said, okay, I'm giving the organization this much money and you need to match it, that kind of thing. And he was always so good about that. And one thing I do remember about the early years is of our staff of 3, we went to David's house, to their house, and we sat through slides of West Texas. We were all like looking at each other like, how long does this last? How long will we be here? And his little girls were out playing, and he got so irritated. He wanted his girls to be in dresses and not be frolicking out in the yard or anything. And it's so funny because, of course, he's I think a great grandfather now. But I'll never forget that. That's the slideshow. And you could tell he just wanted to go back to Texas so badly. And he eventually, of course, did, and became the director of the archives. So that was you asked if there, I mean, one of your questions was about any significant events while I was there, and they were quite significant. The Vietnam War ended. We were, the troops were withdrawn. That was something. And one of the more interesting and fun things was that I remember Bob and myself standing at one of those tall, thin windows that building had, or maybe still has. I don't know. And we stood there and counted 15 streakers across the plaza.
Was it at the end of the war?
No, not necessarily associated, but it was that same time period in the early 70s. Yeah.
That was a thing.
And I left sometime later in probably summer of 73.
Okay.
Because I was married in the spring. So, and we went off to University of Iowa, where I was a student briefly and loved it, but I had to work.
Okay.
So I did a job that I wasn't crazy about in the university hospital, and I waited until I saw something else, and I was able to make a lateral transfer to the art library as the assistant art librarian, which was another significant moment in my life. And that's another person that Harlan Sifford, that I'm still in touch with, although I need to check on him. He's well into his 80s, perhaps 90 by now. I'm not sure, but so I loved it. I loved being, and he was thrilled that I had some archives experience. And that's one reason he wanted me to reorganize his files. And that was one of the things I did.
How long were you?
But that's when I first began feeling old, when the students would come in and they would call me ma'am. And I was still in my 20s. I thought, oh, it's all over. So.
And how long were you there?
About 4 years. Some of that, half of that in Iowa City, and then we moved out into a little town called Oxford, Iowa, which is near the Amana colonies. I don't know if you're familiar with Iowa at all, but I lived in a converted building that was owned by who became a rather prominent photographer. He documented that town later. I think he moved back into that place, and we had upstairs. Another artist friend had the downstairs, and my husband was a painting major and the assistant to the director of the program. So that was nice. But anyway, he did document Oxford, Iowa later. This photographer. Whose name would come to me, but you're not, you don't need that. And then so when I the joke around some of the community and the historian and archivist community, the joke is that I've worked everywhere except Georgia Tech. So when I came back from Iowa, there was a grant-funded position available at what was the Atlanta Historical Society, and it was a grant-funded position for what they were calling the Visual Arts Coordinator, and that was my area. Yeah. I mean, I really was so absolutely interested in the arts and imagery, and so that was just great. And then it was refunded, and so I actually became their first photo archivist. So and it was just wonderful, and I did a lot of I began doing exhibits there. So I did and became fascinated with daguerreotypes, which was the first time I'd ever been exposed to that, encased images. And I am a member of the Daguerrean Society now, and pretty active. although I'm not a real collector. These people are high rollers. I am not. I only have a few.
And how long were you there?
At oh gosh, 2-3 years, I guess, maybe. And I had left when I left Georgia State. And when I got married and left Georgia State and went off to Iowa, I still hadn't finished my bachelor's. I still didn't have my BA. So when I was at the Historical Society, it was just in the back of my mind all the time. So I started taking classes at night and while I was working, and at Georgia State, back to Georgia State. So I did eventually leave in order to get it done, and I actually ended up with a history degree and with a minor in studio arts because I still had all those credits. So, but being with the History Center, I mean, I knew I had found my calling. I mean, that was it for me. That's what I wanted to be doing. And but when once I got my degree and I was back, looking for a job, I ended up as a librarian for the Southern Engineering Company. I learned how to. I picked up a very good skill, which was figuring out how to move an entire library.
That's a very good skill.
Something you can always use.
Were they moving?
Pardon?
Were they moving? Is that why you had
Yeah,
to...
well, we were in Midtown. Across from the old Kresge, our in Midtown, there was what were they? The people who drew up the blueprints and everything else they were all over there in that old Kresge building, and I ended up with some of the big letters from the. I have an E and a G, it was my husband's name. I'm the E, being the E with my first name is Elsbeth, and my last name is Eltzroth. So so I have a big E and a big G, and I haven't ever used them. But so that was, it was an interesting couple of years that I spent with them. But while I was there, I did apply to. I wanted that library degree, so I did apply to Emory, and lo and behold, one day the director showed up in my office in Southern Engineering and trying to coax me to come. No, and knowing that I really couldn't afford it. I mean, I was pretty much totally on my own. That was something my parents didn't do, is they did not pay for my education. That was on me. And so he convinced me that I could get an assistantship, I could apply for scholarships, I could do this, I could do that, and I did all those things.
That's awesome.
And I ended up doing my assistantship with the Special Collections Department at Emory. So, and my project was to completely inventory their collections for photographs and other images. So I did that. I did, so I did that for 2 years. I mean, I was there 2 years as that assistant, and then I took then someone left, and I took that job as the assistant processing archivist. So learned a lot again. always learning. And so I was there another 2 years. So, about 4 years altogether. And really another woman that I really admired was Linda Matthews, who was the department head at the time. Absolutely wonderful woman. Very understanding. And in fact, was it Georgia State? Oh, when I was a student, I had my bag stolen a few times at Georgia State, all my worldly goods, and and once at Emory. So hasn't happened in a while, thank goodness. But it seems to me it was at Georgia State that someone was hit over the head in the library. And anyway, I had mentioned this to Linda, and we always worked alone on Saturdays there. And from that time on, we never worked alone.
Wow.
And we had a plan in place. If anything happened, we do this, we lock this door, we're in there, and but I had no idea when I just mentioned this what's going to happen, but it was a good thing. It was a good thing. So anyway, I really enjoyed being at Emory, and I guess that's now the Rose Library, but I think it was just called the Special Collections Department at the time. I don't think there was a particular name, but I believe the head librarian then, and as now, was a woman. And I remember another one, I really liked her, and I would never be able to recall her name in a million years. I left Emory to take a job as a librarian with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So one of my forays into the private sector. So I stayed there a few years and left to go it alone. I become self-employed, working with images, and I had the name Visual Scene South was the name of my business. So I did all kinds of things, and getting people to pay me was one of the, just a nightmare. Another reason not to be self-employed. So I came back to GSU. One of my jobs was I came back to GSU as a consultant on I have to read this because I can't remember the title, the Directory of Photographic Collections in the Atlanta, Athens area. So and I came there in '86, and we put that thing out in '87.
Wow.
So, way out of date, but now. But another great experience, another good experience. I talked to people all over the area and interviewed people about about their collections, and it was a very good experience. And so on weekends I had been working at one of the other things I did, I hope you're not seeing this, something came on my screen there.
Nope.
Was that I went back to the History Center, what's now the History Center, and I processed a collection of landscape architects' drawings. That was for the Cherokee Garden Library, which I think is now actually part of the History Center, but they were separate. They were located there, but they were separate at the time, and that was exciting. That was a really fun, interesting project. So on weekends Saturdays, I worked at the State Archives as a reference archivist and helping genealogists, and looking up my Georgia photographers on the side. So they put me on to another project, which was I ended up for a few years. I was the lead photo. What would you call it? Photo editor and lead researcher on the firm history. I worked with Dr. Hardy Jackson, Dr. Historian, on the history of Hansel and Post, which became Jones Day, Reeves and Pogue, and I think they're something else now. but it was a centennial history for them. So that was fun. I got to interview current photographers to do the photographs of the current staff, and then I planned the book ends, for the inside of the book on both ends. And it was printed by Mercer University Press, and they did something that I really didn't anticipate, which was they wrote right over those beautiful photographs, which were spiral staircases, the old Hurt building, which is where they had begun, and their current spiral staircase was in the other end. They went, and got to do a lot of other photo related things there. So then I went back to Emory and worked as a consultant on their research libraries group, AMC Arlen catalog reconversion project. That is what became Galileo. So that was fun. That was fun. And I had a couple of grad assistants working under me, which was always fun. And then I began working for the State Archives as a consultant. And on a visual materials database project. And then that was refunded. So I ended up being there for 4 years, almost 4 years. Yeah, 89 to 93, I think. So, and that was when the Georgia Historical Society was actually part of the State Archives. So I got to do a lot of work in Savannah, which was fun.
Yeah.
And, of course, all those people that I worked with that are long gone. And, but it was really fun, and got to see an awful lot of collections, an awful lot of images, and then, learning. And I was also working with the Society of Georgia Archivists, as then was their newsletter editor, and then I was the managing editor for the journal, and all of that for 3 or 4 years. Worked on that, and then I went back to the private sector. Decided, okay, I'm tired of just doing it on my own thing. And I went to private sector, and I applied for and got, because I said, oh, your resume really stood out. Was the manager of the photo video archives, the Librarian archives for photo video services.
Okay.
So that was great fun. I completely organized the library, the photo library. And goodness, I mean, I didn't even have cable TV until then. And I thought, oh, I've got to get that. I had to know who was doing what and who these people were. Boxes of 5,000 images would show up at my door, in front of the door when I'd come into work, that, no identification. Oh, it was crazy, but it was a lot of fun, and a lot of, they had, and Ted Turner was still there, and they had MGM, he purchased MGM, and so all those great movie stills, all of that stuff was there. And I was in an elevator, and I was standing in back of this fellow, and I was saying, what a ratty suit, because I'm practically, like this. Suit is really, and it was Ted Turner. But he was still married to Jane Fonda, so she was in and out and up and down, and she was, gotta say, not the friendliest person. And when I'd come in to work on Saturdays, and because basically I had to, and she would be bringing in and out all of her racks of clothes, or they would, and she would be pounding on the intercom because the elevator wasn't there. She would say, do you know who I am? that's one of those women that, you know, I like the actress, but I just never got over that thing. So so when I left Georgia State, when I left Turner, I sort of thought, you know, my husband was absolutely aghast. He was saying, "Oh, we're gonna have to." We had just bought a house. "Oh, we're gonna have to sell the house." And don't worry about it. And that was Ken Thomas, who's his historian, said, "Oh, Lee, she always comes back, falls back on her feet." I'm just like saying, "Oh, don't worry about it. Something will turn up." So, and lo and behold, I had at some point I was working, when was that? I did come back to Georgia State and worked as I filled in as a reference archivist.
Oh.
I have no idea when that was. So in the oh, I also did a project for the Westminster Schools on their archives photo and retrieval project. And 92 to 93, I was doing a fill-in kind of thing in the department as a reference archivist, sort of covering for lunches and all that kind of thing. So I was, you know, because Bob was acting head. Bob Denman was acting head at that point, and he knew me, and you know, we'd known each other for eons, and he knew what I was capable of. So I came in and did that, and so once I left Turner, by the summer of '95, there was a new director, and that was Julia Marks Young at the department, and I got a phone call sort of out of the blue asking if I'd be interested in applying for this position that they were for part-time as project manager for the Georgia Women's Archives Project. And would I come in and interview, and was I interested? And I said, well, yes, I think I'd be interested. And I went in and I interviewed with Diane Folks and Julia, and they seemed to be impressed enough to offer me the job. And so I started in July '95.
What was there at that time? What were there any records gathered at that point, or was it you had to gather them?
It was just getting going. I was to get that was the thing. I was to get the project underway, and so I initiated collecting areas and established the book collection. You know, started gathering things together for that, and along with became very palsy with the Women's Studies Institute, and together we got that oral history project going, and I initiated donors' participation in that, and so in July of '97 they ranked me as an assistant professor, and the project became the Women's Collections at Donna Nova Cole's Georgia Women's Movement Archives. So I pretty much was doing the same kind of thing, but I also started curating the rotating exhibits. We had the cases made, and that happened to be that person who was doing that was someone I knew from. I had also done work with the DeKalb Historical Society on a photo project I'd forgotten about. Big thing. I did a public speaking and a big exhibit, enlarged photographs, and did a teacher's guide and the whole thing. And so she was working at the DeKalb Historical Society and their exhibits at the time, so I knew her too, and that was fun. And So we got those exhibit cases made, and also used the wall cases that were already there.
Oh,
And,
I didn't realize they were already there. So there were already the 3 there, and so it was the big flat one.
It was the freestanding ones that were made at that time, yeah. And so that was the big change for me, was beginning to do those exhibits, which I absolutely loved, and coordinating the oral history project, which was exciting and interesting, and I got to know so many people. And I planned and designed the website. That was a challenge and a whole new thing for me. So I did a lot of I supervised graduate assistants, and so I wasn't doing as much processing as before they were doing it. And so I began speaking in the not only in the department, but outside the department, and out of state at meetings about this project, about the project, and started writing some short pieces, and met with donors that we wanted to interview. And I met with someone in Ann Arbor, Michigan, when I was there for a meeting and speaking about the project, in fact. And I remember meeting with someone in Port St. Joe, Florida, because I was there, probably on vacation. So that part of it was really fun and exciting. And
so I have a question about that, because you literally are starting from scratch, and this is not many archivists get to do this. Finding the donors. How did you find your donors, and were they excited about what you were doing?
I think a lot of it was putting me in. I think the Women's Studies Institute, and I think Diane had a lot to do with that, about that, getting, thinking of coming up with these names and people she knew, and then so-and-so knows so-and-so, and looking at lists of who was at what meetings, and trying to get in touch with these people. Yes, and it just kept building, and until, and then I guess Donna came in at that point, and and things just sort of snowballed.
And were the women generally excited about what you were doing?
Oh, I think so. Yes. Oh, yes. And because it validated what they had done. Yes, it was important. Yes, I was there, and yes, and I'm thrilled you're going to document this. Yeah, sure. I'm very excited. Just, and especially sometimes they come out of, it seemed as if we came out of the blue, I think. Like, oh, really? You want to talk to me? Yes, thank you. Thank you for thinking of me, Yeah, it was really exciting. And so I was there for over 6 years.
Okay. And how much did it expand over that time?
Quite a bit. We had things coming in all the time. And I began looking at, as I said, the university women and what they had done, and what, how that related. So I was looking at your questions, and it was said, what is the most unique item you worked with? And I wouldn't say unique, but my favorite thing was working with those photographs and artifacts. Yeah. Just the buttons, just the wonderful buttons.
Awesome.
And all kinds of things, pennants, and I loved putting them together to tell a story through these exhibits. And I think that was a really important step, because anyone coming into that department could see that and look at that story and say, wow, I didn't know that. That's amazing. That happened here. You know, so I loved, and I loved reading over and correcting the transcripts, going through the transcripts and getting them in order. You know, and of course we were doing the cassette thing. You know, that's what we had. That's what we used. But I loved, you know, and building the collections library. You know, just the books that were coming in with collections or other donations of just books and things like that. And in fact, I myself donated some things, and my father did. So that was sort of fun. And but you know, at that point there was a decent sized staff. It's nothing like it is now, I'm sure, nothing. But it was a good staff. I mean, we were good and we worked well together. And Peter Roberts was there still, and Laurel, and Bob Dinwiddie, and later Pam Hepbart-Dean came in. And Chris Payton was with the music collection, and Christine the Canzero came in to assist her. Yeah. So it was a good group. But my most unloved part of this whole thing was we had the most ridiculously long staff meetings.
How long?
And Julia would get mad at me because I was always looking at my watch. She would say, "Do you have to be somewhere?" And all I could think of was, "I'd rather be working right now."
That's funny.
Oh, they just went on and on and on. I mean, 3 hours. We're talking an entire morning gone. And I did not miss that.
It's so interesting, Lee, because when Pam was department head, she would 1 hour. That was it. It had to be done in 1 hour.
I'm the you know, one of the things I do now is I'm the president of my my public libraries friends group, and we have some people on the board who just love to ramble, and I'm just like, you have 5 minutes. You know, say what you need to say. I you know, I think they think I'm a little bit, yeah. But I realize we're all volunteers, but really, I really don't want to hear all that. Too much information. But you know, that you know, that was the one thing that I could have done without.
So when you were like, so that when you very first were working at Georgia State, you were over in Library North. When you're working as a women's archivist, you're over in Library South.
Yes.
What did special collections physically look like then?
Well, I wish, you know, I need to come back to I haven't been back in a while to see how things have shifted. Was this that big lobby area where the desk used to be, the receptionist desk was, and then the Mercer room was on the side. And one of the few things that I remember changing was that they redid that Mercer room, but it was still in the same place. At one point, I think, in the old days, I think it was in a little room in the library, but not connected to special collections or anything. And then we had the big workroom, and then the smaller room, which was where we called it the balkanization, because we basically had to divide this room up, which also dates it, doesn't it? We had to divide the room up with basically, you know, our bookcases and whatever else we could come up with, so that Bob was in one area, Laura was in the other area, and I was in that third area.
Was that little room that's beside?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yes, all three of us were in there. Yes. And we had our separate phones, you know, that was the office. Yes. That was our office. And it got interesting. I think there was a point where, you know, two people wouldn't be speaking to each other, and but we're in the same room. What's it got to be freaking? But it worked. It worked as well as it could. And then we had whoever was doing processing were in that back room, and then all the stacks were back there too in that big room. And then I don't know if the department heads still got that same office.
Yep.
Yeah, that was out. Yeah. So that was it.
So between thinking beyond special collections, between the time you were a student assistant and then the time you came back as a women's archivist, what did the library did the library change at all physically?
Yes. I know administration changed quite a bit, and that was completely reconfigured. Now, at one point, we had to move out, and I'm actually, it might have been twice, but I don't remember if this was associated with one was associated with the other or not. They were like taking all the tile off the side of the library, and the noise was so incredible. They gave us noise canceling headphones, which was hard. You couldn't really work, you know. You couldn't, you know, an archivist. What is it? There's some kind of they're up and down, you know, a million times a day, walking, you know, doing this, doing it, up, down. You couldn't really do much with these stupid headphones on. Anyway, we moved out, and like I said, I'm not sure if that was associated with that or it was another. I know that at one point we got all new flooring in that workroom at least. So it may have been that time, but anyway, we all moved out to another area, and it was near administration. I remember that. And I don't know if it's the old administration area or the revamped one. Got me. And then another time, maybe it was when they're doing the flooring. I know I had to work out in that lobby area. But nothing major at that point. Nothing.
So you didn't have the bricks falling off the library south. Were you gone by that time?
Or maybe that was the bricks that they were taking. I don't know what they were doing out there.
I'm not sure when
they were removing the exterior.
Yeah,
that might have been, yeah. That could have been it. Huh.
I know at some point.
I know it was shortly after while we were in that more in the administration area, which was a very strange work situation. But my father had passed away, another mentor to me and a friend, and I was having a really tough time because we were out of our element, really. We were working elsewhere, and I began to think about what did I want to do. And something else had happened that also made me think about this. And I know you already. Oh, by the way, I did do a really great. I thought it was a really good exhibit having to do with the university that I did downstairs. That was something that everybody could see, but it was associated with special collections, but about the university itself and university women. So that was sort of fun. And while I was in that position, I was also on the advisory team. I was a team member for the Georgia Women's History Context Study, which was supported by the Department of Natural Resources and Historic Preservation. So that's where we met. And it was really an honor to represent GSU at this, and the women's, the collection at those meetings. So that was sort of exciting. And I think that was when I got we loaned materials to the state capitol. I don't know, did that ever come back? Still there? Yeah. Okay, that was it. But
can you tell me a bit about fundraising? How you did fundraising?
Oh, well, I wasn't in that end of it. Thank goodness. As it was, I'm not a telephone person. I would save all my donor calls for the day when I was feeling really chatty, and I'd do them all, you know. And of course, you know, if they were calling me, then of course I didn't have any control over that. But that was supposed to be Julia's area. Now I know when Bob was not given that position, he was told it was because he did not have fundraising experience. You never knew what to think about that. But it was Julia and Diane who were really the fundraising arm, and I had little to nothing to do with that, which was fine with me, because I don't think that's my forte. Although now I'm involved in it with the Friends of the Library, so go figure. But you did mention or had asked about women in leadership roles, and my only thought on that was at the university that I think after Dr. Pullen, I think all the directors were women. I could be wrong.
Until now.
Until now?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. There you go.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So that occurred to me, and plus all the directors of the department and special collections.
We had one who's man, but the rest of
them. I do vaguely remember that.
Yeah.
And how long has the present director been there?
Of special collections?
Mm-hmm.
Since 2017, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, she's great.
Okay. And I know that there were several women in upper administrative positions at the university, and we tried to sort of bring them in for events and things like that. You know, definitely see that they were invited, but other than what I mentioned, there wasn't an awful lot of growth or change while I was there in that 6 point whatever years. We were pretty stable.
Okay. What did the university look like at that point? You know, because Georgia State was changed.
Well, Cal Hall was still there, and I'm still upset about that. My thing was to come into that door, and there used to be and when they took that clock away, I just thought that was the end of the world. You know, I would walk through that door, I would look at that clock, and I would know, you know, how late or early I was for whatever class or whatever it was. So yeah, it was pretty much the old university, and not much has changed, but except that the library grew.
Yeah, because when you were
we did get the you know, those some of the other buildings around 5 Points. Those began to happen. Business administration and, you know, all of those, we moved into those various other locations. So yeah, that and on Decatur Street and you know, other things. yeah, that started as far as the university goes. But that main campus changed very little.
So do
So
you,
this new thing that's happening, I mean, that is just, I mean, you know, that's the first big change that I, you know, am aware of.
when you like went from like the early 70s and you were coming back to Georgia State every now and then to work or to study,
Uh-huh.
were you like watching Library South kind of emerge from, you know, because Library North was
Well, yeah,
coming up.
yeah.
Um,
And then once it was there, it was just so the norm, you know, you just didn't think about it. Like it's oh, hasn't this always been here kind of thing? Yeah. No, it was fun knowing that there were these two arms basically that, you know, and you can, it was fun to, oh yeah, now how do you, which floor do you get across on? I can't remember. That kind of thing. But yeah, that was a major change. Yeah.
and
So
then
that was fun.
I think there's one of the questions where I think that the women's collection really speaks to this. The questions about the way that special collections and the city of Atlanta kind of come together. Like a lot of donors are really centered in the city of Atlanta.
I mean, we did certainly do a lot of, we related a great deal to the Atlanta community, especially with the nursing associations and other professional associations that were headquartered in Atlanta. But our gist was, I mean, we were for the state, you know, we were concerned about documenting all things that were going all over the state. And that was sort of fun, you know, getting in touch with these people in South Georgia and East Georgia and Augusta and Savannah and Thomasville, you know, Macon, whatever, you know, just to try to get out of the Atlanta mode kind of thing. So that I think was fairly important, and I hope it still is.
Oh, we're very, very, I think, community centered special collections, which is kind of, I think, kind of wonderful.
Yeah. It was, well, it was certainly probably a larger part of it, you know, of what we had was really Atlanta metro area kind of thing. There was an awful lot. But, you know, we wanted to be known as the Georgia rather than the Atlanta. So when, you know, in my exhibits, I really did try to highlight some of these things out, you know, from all over.
Yes. So when you were there as a women's archivist, did you feel like the library administration supported special collections?
I did. And I think certainly we got, I don't think I never felt that they were against us, let's say. We're trying to get rid of us or anything like that. No, and we made sure that people were invited. And we had a lot of support from the history department, male and female, you know, the men as well as the you know, they were interested. And I know I still belong to the Association of Southern Historians, women historians or something, and there are a lot of, you know, we have a lot of male members. So we just, you know, they were always invited in the administration and trying to get them to see what we were doing and to understand. And I think I never felt that there was any animosity at all at that point in time.
Is that same for like the university administration as well?
That's what I mean. Yeah, I didn't feel that there was a problem, but maybe I was in my own little bubble. I don't know. Maybe they were keeping it from me. I didn't feel that. I don't think that.
And what did you think, like, the campus felt like, you know, the physical campus, but and not just like the physical buildings, but the body of the student body?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, I liked the busyness. I mean, you know, there were students everywhere, and since was a student there, I mean, I felt I had grown up there. I started as a student there in the fall of 69. So, you know, and I kept coming back, and I always enjoyed that. And I'll be interested to see how this new plaza area works, you know, because we loved sitting on the edges, you know, on there, and they would often have bands out there, or you know, guitarist or somebody, and or all, you know, some organization giving away freebies, or you know, whatever, trying to sell us something, whatever. But it was just, you know, constant. And then, you know, I would got to the point where I would go through that. Once that other building was newer, since I was a student. The student classroom building actually was built. I mean, it's old now, but I mean, that was, you know, that came up as I was, maybe while I was still working there as a student assistant, but that was like the new building, you know, and I guess, I don't even know if that you know, we had that whole underground parking area you would walk through and get into the other buildings, and you know, I'm sure that's completely changed.
Not much.
No.
Not much.
Well, good to know. Good to know. But yeah, I always enjoyed the campus area, the urban campus. I mean, I just, you know, that was where I grew up. So that was never a problem with me. But you know, my when I was still living at home, and I moved away from home when I was about 20, but my dad would sometimes drop me off there, you know, in front of like Sparks, or you know, in that area, and I would be always, you know, I had, you know, an exam or something, and he said to me, and I always remember this, he said, you know, you're going to have to do something you don't want to do every day, and you'll live.
That's great advice.
Yes, words to live by. Yeah. So anyway.
What eventually took you away from Georgia State then?
Well, as I was saying, I was just sort of starting to think, well, what am I going to be doing? And then one of the major challenges I faced and did not overcome was that we were offered a significant collection of women in the military, and it was tremendous. There were documents, artifacts, uniforms, manuscripts, a myriad of, I mean, across the board. It was wonderful, and it was ours if we wanted it. I could not get past Julia on this. And I never understood what was going on and why. But it would have required a lot of work on our part. We would have to have done more fundraising. We would have to have new housing for some of these things, take care of this stuff that we didn't have at that point, but we couldn't. And I suppose that's what did it for her, is it would require so much work from us to make sure that it was taken care of properly. So that broke my heart. I mean, it broke my heart. These two women we had become great friends. They wanted us to have it, and they wanted it to be there. And they were a big part of the women's movement, that these two women, and everything they had done since. And they had written several books. They had been collecting stuff from all over the country. Anyway, we couldn't take it, and it went to the Library of Congress.
I had never heard of this. I had no idea that happened.
That sort of did it. That's when I really, really started thinking about leaving, and I just thought, You know, I was almost in tears. I just couldn't believe I couldn't get past that wall to accept this collection. So I started about, you know, I was just losing heart.
Yeah.
And I, you know, I had put a lot of work into getting this thing going and keeping the momentum and training people. And I was just rethinking everything and what did I want to do. And I left, and I did a little bit more consulting. And in fact, one of the things I did was how to begin and maintain an oral history project. But then I decided to try my hand at an online book business, and I had a book business called Seed South Books, etc., for 6-8 years. But at the same time, I started working on I had been keeping a database of Georgia photographers, which was minor at that point, and I began working I now call it the Georgia Photographers Documentation Project. I write about and document state's photographers, and that is incredibly important to me and their associates, and I do a lot of writing on women and minorities in the profession. And in fact, I was asked to speak at the University of Virginia on that topic at a conference on the African American portraits in the United States and South Africa, and that was exciting. I spoke, and that was just that was a real validation for my work. And I've been researching, writing, and publishing in that area, and have published in the Librarian Journal, which is a big fancy thing, and then for the Georgia Museum and University of Georgia, I presented and then later published that article, which just came out this past, February. Yeah, so that, you know, and then I've been writing a blog, keeping a blog since 2013 on exactly that, and I get calls from all over, and people contact me from all over the place about photographers and or photographs in their family. And I've actually been gifted a few collections, one fairly large collection of an Atlanta photographer, and another one of Savannah area photographs. And I purchased another Atlanta family photo collection. I've got to stop collecting now.
It's
and I, you know, have quite a. It's too much. So
it's really
gotten to be.
It's kind
hard
of
to handle.
I was going to say, it's kind of wonderful that you have had your whole professional life has, like, your personal interest. You've been so fortunate to be able to have that touch everything that you've done.
It is, you know, and it's always, and when I was writing this, I was thinking about Wordsworth, you know, that I am a part of all that I have met. And I feel it, you know, everything built on everything else, and it all touched. And as I said, it was so, you know, when I started thinking about being there at the beginning and ending my library archives career at the same place. In different eras.
Yeah.
You know, it's just every time I write about it, or if someone asks me about it, I'm always just like, did I really do all that? Was I really there, you know?
Yeah.
But it feels good, and and I appreciate you asking me to talk about that whole era of Georgia State and that department.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to being able to come back and having everyone unmasked.
Well, I can't wait. I really can't wait.
It's the only way we see each other unmasked, you know.
I'm seriously, I really miss seeing everyone, and especially this is our 25th year.
Yes.
So it's really been unfortunate that this has all happened, but I'm grateful for being able to do this. You know, we're able to at least see one another during this time. And we've actually been able to do interviews with people in other states, and we're planning interviews with people in other countries, which we never would be even thinking about doing.
Well, yeah.
So
I tell you, it's that, you know, there's that plus side.
Yeah. But I'm just like, this interview was like, I just was desperate to hear about all of the early days, because I just didn't know anything about it. And so I'm super grateful.
I just, you know, and I honestly had not thought that about the fact that I was there at the beginning. I really didn't. And I was writing down, I said, 50, is that is that right? Is there another number in there?
But so few people get a chance to like start, like do what you did and start. So it's so interesting that you were there when like the Southern Labour Archives was just like getting its roots
in its infancy,
to give roots to the women's collection.
And you know, David Gracie was out. You know, he was out every day getting, you know, and it was so funny because we kept thinking that he's so unlike these union bosses that he's talking to. How does he do it? But he was great. He brought that stuff in. It was coming in, and he was great.
Yeah.
Well, I have a great deal of respect for him, and I really appreciate. I hear from him, you know, just every so often, and he'll because you know, just of something that I sent to the SGA list or whatever. He's just like, you know, text,
so beloved.
Email me. Yeah. So have you talked to him yet?
He is not doing well. He is very sick right now.
Oh no!
I didn't want to. I was going to tell you after we close this off. He is kind of end stage of cancer, and so we did manage to get a little interview with him. And Christina and I did a little video of special collections and all of where all our collections are, and to send it to his family. You could see that, see where things had, you know, how things had changed, and
yeah.
But such a nice man.
Oh, he is. He was just sharp as it can be. When I was in Austin at another meeting, I belonged to the ARLIS, Art Library Society of North America. And I used to alternate SAA meetings with that, but then it became, you know, I was just so involved with the photography and imagery that I just started staying with ARLIS. And so I was in Austin a few times, and I just didn't get to see him, but I'm so glad I did get to see him in Athens that time, and then heard from him several times after that. But it has been a while, so I wish him the best.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I'm going to stop the recording now. Have you had a second?